residents of a large city, probably the most common face of government is the police. It may be one of the most wanted of municipal services by many, but it also may be one of the most feared by some, including many law-abiding citizens. In New York City, police street patrol policies and a series of deadly incidents have fed the tension and mutual suspicion between police and residents in many poor neighborhoods. We'll be getting an insider's perspective on all this from former New York City Police Commissioner William Bratton. But first, to set the stage for our discussion, we have this report from CSS Urban Agenda correspondent Kathleen Trigg-Jones.
No one's saying it's easy being a cop in New York City. You never know what's around the next corner. You never know who might turn on you. But people of color are saying it's not easy being a civilian here either. A December 1999 report by New York's Attorney General found that blacks in New York City were stopped by police 6 times more often than whites, and Hispanics 4 times more often. It found that while blacks make up 25% of the city's population, 50% of people stopped by police are black. The police are under orders from the Giuliani administration to be aggressive in cracking down on even the most minor violations, as well as narcotics infractions. But as much as it may help to crack down on the drug problem many minorities fear, too many innocent people are being killed in the mix. Who could forget February 4th, 1999, when black immigrant Amadou Diallo, unarmed and standing in the doorway of his Bronx apartment, was gunned down, shot at 41 times by 4 white New York City police officers. 19 of the bullets were buried into the innocent man's body. The Diallo shooting would spark public outcry and countless protests from blacks and others who felt the attack by the city's elite street crimes unit was racially motivated. It will be the first of several like incidents to follow in the city, raising the question about whether these aggressive police tactics are really necessary.
These encounters between undercover or plainclothes officers and residents of the city of New York are inherently dangerous.
Nancy Chang of the Center for Constitutional Rights is surprised neither by the violence in these cases nor by the Attorney General's conclusions. She's filed a lawsuit seeking changes in the way police operate.
The defendants are the City of New York, the mayor of the city, and the police commissioner, and a number of the officers in the street crime unit. Okay. And it has been brought as a class action on behalf of the group of all people in this city who are being stopped and frisked illegally or may be subject to such stops and frisks.
But criticism is not confined to only outsiders. Sergeant Anthony Miranda is a police supervisor and president of the Latino Officers Association.
I think what they're engaging is what we call statistical warfare, and just simply a program and boosting numbers. And unfortunately, it's at the expense of minority communities because they are targeting specifically minority communities.
As an officer, Miranda is in a sensitive position because although he represents the community and Latino officers, his sworn duty is to enforce the law. But he says what's happening is just not right.
They're simply trying to improve numbers, irregardless of what the impact is having on the people, the hardworking people of the community. And while they want to say that these people are somehow feel safer because of their programs, they're not addressing the other people who are being tossed around the streets simply because they're getting caught in sweeps or because people are harassing them, asking them for identification when there's no legitimate reason for it.
We tried to get police to respond to the Attorney General's report, but they refused our request. The Giuliani administration says its policing policies have successfully reduced crime, and it says those strategies are widely misunderstood, pointing to a reduction in police shootings. This is still scant comfort to minorities who feel vulnerable to police harassment. Justified or not, there are many who fear any hassle with police could be a fatal mistake. This is Kathleen Trigg-Jones reporting for CSS Urban Agenda.
We're joined today by William Bratton, who's uniquely qualified to talk about the subjects that we have under review today. He was police commissioner for the City of New York for the first 2 years of the Giuliani administration. He was former commissioner of police of the Boston Police, and also the New York City Transit Authority, Transit Police. I hope I get it right. He's become, I think, by all sides considered a major expert and commentator on what's happening with police forces across the nation. Bill, you've seen the tape. I think, as a matter of fact, at the time of the Diallo killing, you made some statements that this was a time to do some reforms in New York City. What do you take of what's happening here?
The opening line of Tale of Two Cities, book I first read in high school, they were the best of times, they were the worst of times. I think that very aptly describes New York City at this time. The year 2000, city is certainly a much safer place than it was in the late 80s, early 90s. Economy is booming, the quality of life has improved. But for many in this city, particularly in minority communities, it is quite clear that the reality or the perception, and perception is reality, that when you have that perception, is that the benefits are not accruing equally to them. They feel they are being stopped much out of proportion to their numbers by the police, and that the gains that are being made in crime reduction, while benefiting them on the one hand, are causing them great concern, aggravation, and harassment on the other. I share that belief.
Now, there have been some discussions that this may be directly attributable to the new program, the essentially street crimes unit, the sort of strike force idea, as opposed to the community policing idea that was perhaps under the Giuliani and to some extent the Koch administration before. What is your feeling? Is there any relationship between the manner of policing and what's going on here?
Certainly. I think what is happening is, let's put it in medical terms. You had a seriously ill patient in the late 80s, early 90s here in New York City. They were in the trauma center. They were on life support. And it required very assertive, very aggressive treatment to get that patient out of that room into the intensive care ward and eventually get it on its feet. However, as in medicine, that there comes a point in time, you're dealing with a cancer, you begin to pull back. The patient is getting better. I think the major error in this city is that in a broad brush way throughout the city, but particularly being felt in communities of color in New York, the treatment has not abated. The assertive policing is continuing and in fact is increasing, and it's being felt even more now because the conditions that first required it back in '94, when there were 8,000 open-air drug locations, when quality of life was so bad in so many areas, it's improved. The mayor describes, rightfully so, the city as the safest large city in America, capital of the world. But in communities of color, in the minority neighborhoods, the police presence seems to be more oppressive, and they're saying, where is the peacetime benefit? Sure, there are more jobs, property values going up, the shootings have abated, but we're feeling oppressed. We're feeling that the police are not there so much protecting us as harassing us. And that is the reality in New York City. This isn't just a perception. That is the reality, and I believe it.
Of course, this has always been one of the arguments when you get a totalitarian state. The first things they fix, criminality drops to nothing. I think the former Soviet Union.
Well, I think we're a long way from totalitarian state.
But obviously, if you lock down, I'm not, nor am I arguing that. But one of the things that they argue, obviously, is you lock it down tightly, you stop crime.
The lid is screwed too tight right now. The whole idea here of community policing, which I'm a strong advocate of, is that you focus policing, smart policing. Certain neighborhoods still need assertive policing. Other neighborhoods need a different type of policing, and we haven't made that adjustment.
How much of the decline is attributable to demographic trends that are sweeping the nation? What's going on here? I mean, the decline obviously is going on everywhere, but certainly not to the extent New York has seen it. But what's going on here? What part are we doing that's effective, and what part is a demographic decline, which of course, as demographics and the economy change, may not last. They're like everything else. There are ups and downs in this, I assume.
The dramatic declines that occurred 94, 95, 96, Giuliani's elected mayor, I'm appointed his first police commissioner. Crime decline of 12% the first year, in excess of 17% the second year, versus during Dave Dinkins' 4 years, crime had gone down a total of about 9 or 10%. It was beginning to go down, but the rapid acceleration of that decline was attributable, I believe, almost entirely because of the speed with which it occurred, to the strategies, the leadership of the department, the increased number of police that we had, that Dave Dinkins had been largely responsible for, although the majority of them were hired during Giuliani's time.
Right.
Demographics, the economy, these are longer-term trends. Even the incarceration rates in this country, which are so huge, and at this point in time, something else that needs to be re-examined, those are longer-term impacts. And New York is benefiting, in some respect, from the longer term, but the principal catalyst for the change conditions in New York are the police, and in some respects, continue to be the police, but the police have now become the catalyst for this sense of oppression, particularly in the minority community. And
Well,
there's the irony, the tables have turned.
As I talk to parents and I sort of try to reflect, I'm 52, so I'm looking back a long
Same
way.
age.
Yeah. Part of the difficulty, obviously, is focused among young people between the ages of 16, 24, clearly hanging out during my childhood in Crown Heights and Bedford-Stuyvesant was what you did. It was clearly an invitation to get into trouble. I was Youth Service Commissioner of the City of New York in the Koch years. Clearly there's been a dramatic reduction in things like youth services programs that would keep this particular group of adolescents and teenagers off the street. How much are the police sort of taking the brunt of other issues, other decisions that are being politically made, not to particularly address the needs of the really prime group?
There is the ultimate irony. American police chiefs, American policing in general, are some of the principal advocates of the midnight basketball type of activity, the prevention activity. They understand that you just cannot arrest your way out of the problems of America. Arrest is appropriate in certain instances, aggressive enforcement, but clearly, particularly now in New York, for example, where the combat zones of the early 90s are largely gone, now's the time to reap the peacetime dividend. The peacetime dividend is you work on the prevention component of it. And prevention is all about safer schools. It's about after-school activity. It's about using the police as much as possible now, instead of in an assertive enforcement fashion, shifting large numbers of those police into mentoring, guidance roles, and roles where they're walking the beats and are known in the community, to begin helping to bring those young people through their potentially troubled years so that they can reach adulthood and become productive citizens of society, rather than so many of them running astray and ending up in our prisons or ending up with records that preclude their continuation of their lives.
Yeah, we look at statistics, obviously, that some neighborhoods in the city of New York have virtually all the male kids having some kind of arrest record,
Incredible.
Which makes them unemployable. And again,
Even in a time of boom economy.
Yeah, it reminds me of my own childhood there, but by the grace of God and people watching me, that's a tough time. I think people want to, sort of brush that over. But adolescents and teenagers with time on their hands is like an invitation to disaster, obviously. Let's talk about the issue of the police themselves. From my childhood again, the issue of the proportion of the police department, which is really reflective of minority neighborhoods, has been a chronic theme. Somewhat better now, but certainly during my tenure in the Koch administration, my association with the Dinkins administration, and currently, it's still not particularly doing very well, and I don't even think it's doing well against other large cities.
Right.
What's going on here?
A number of things. First, let me be quite clear that I think the NYPD is a great police force, staffed largely by great cops who have done yeoman's duty dealing with the situation in the city. There are a number of those officers, a significant number, who should not be on that department. But the department also suffers from a perception issue, and that perception is reality when it comes to the makeup of the force. It is a majority white force in a minority majority city. And under Koch, under Dinkins, under Giuliani, there has not been a great change in the racial makeup of the department, not significant percentage changes. The current hiring practices, which have been in place for years, which have been challenged but have been upheld civil service, will not change the racial makeup of this department in the next generation, the next 20 years. Mathematically, it just cannot happen. Attrition levels, the lack of qualified candidates, the lack of interest, particularly in the part of minority candidates at this juncture. In the next 10 years, the department's going to go through a hiring boom again, thousands upon thousands of officers leaving, and there are going to be fewer and fewer candidates to apply for those jobs and fewer minority candidates, and particularly since we, in a well-intentioned effort, raised the requirements, age 22, 2 years of college. So a lot of those concerns are justified, but the existing system and all the recruiting efforts that the city's been engaged in, $10 million campaigns, are not going to change that. You need to do something more creative. And it's not residency, because you're not going to get residency through the legislature in Albany. What you can do is something that I've advocated since the time I was police commissioner in 1995 with the former Ann Reynolds, the chancellor here at CUNY, which is expansion dramatically of the cadet program, which takes inner city kids, about 70 to 75% minority, 40% female, who come out of the CUNY system as college graduates, pass the civil service exam, they go automatically to the top of the list. If we had begun investing in that program in 1995, by the year 2010, you could have had a minority-majority police force in the city made up of inner-city residents, college-educated, so all the arguments that you're affirmative action or you're letting in people with less credentials
wouldn't be there.
Let's get real about this, and a lot of the politicians of the city have come to understand it. Virginia Fields, Peter Vallone, Mark Green, all of the mayoral candidates understand you need to do something that dramatic.
Well, let's talk about, obviously, the police union itself is very disturbed. They've issued a
and justifiably so.
Poster, obviously. What should we say about the PBA's reaction? They're clearly feeling that this is as much a pay issue. There have been traditional problems between the PBA and issues of civilian complaint review. What is the role of the unions, and how should the public be looking at those issues?
The union plays a key role here because it is truly reflective of what is the attitude of the officers. Officers in this city feel confused and betrayed in that they really do believe, and I believe, that they are largely responsible for being the catalyst for the turnaround in this city, and that a mayor who they very aggressively supported feel that they were disappointed by him in terms of the issue of pay raises, and continuing now in that, by and large, the department, as reflected through its unions, feel that the current policies of continued citywide assertive policing are damaging the reputations of those officers, that it's putting them in harm's way, and that the benefits to them, where they had great public respect in the mid-90s because they were making the city a safer place, the polls show that that respect has deteriorated phenomenally. So they didn't get pay raises. The admiration they had for a short period of time has deteriorated. They're under the gun. And the union, in terms you referenced the advertisement that the union put out discouraging people from applying for the department, is a manifestation of that frustration. And it's something that needs to be addressed. These are very unhappy police at this particular time.
Now, is their argument about pay legitimate? Are they against other departments not being paid as well?
Phenomenally underpaid when compared to particularly Long Island, that officers out in Long Island are making $65,000, $70,000 a year versus $45,000 in the city here after 5 years. Any resident of New York City understands how difficult it is to live in this city on $40,000 or $45,000
What about
a
against
year.
Boston and L.A.?
Boston and L.A. pay much better. Right. Boston has all types of educational incentives for officers, that they get extra pay for the educational incentive. And what also I think harms this city is the parity situation that's existed for many years, that every union gets exactly the same pay raise no matter what their contribution, no matter what the risk they take. Police officers, I would argue, are the most at-risk public employees in this city, in that they, one, now have to have 2 years of college education to get on the job, something firefighters and sanitation workers don't have to have. They don't get summers off like most school teachers do, who have required to have at least a college education. And they are physically at risk every day, like firefighters. But there is no group of city workers that has the litigation potential in the sense of getting jammed up, as the 4 officers in the Diallo case found themselves in the space of several seconds, their lives destroyed, and the life of an innocent young man also destroyed in terms of that he lost his life.
Well, let's talk about civilian complaint review. I mean, that's one of the things the PBA, I think, is very concerned about.
Which is something that also impacts heavily on police.
What is the feeling among the professionals that you represent about civilian complaint review boards?
Civilian complaint review boards that myself, I have not found one that works. My predecessor, Lee Brown, when he was commissioner when the CCRB was first proposed and moved forward by David Ninkins, made a similar statement. Lee's black, he's now the mayor of Houston. Mm-hmm. I still have not found one that works in the sense that everybody, or even majority, feel that it's functioning correctly. New York's clearly is not. It's been underfunded from the beginning. The quality of its personnel has suffered because of that underfunding, understaffing, underpay. The timeliness of their investigations is atrocious because of all those factors. Police officers, it's a fact of life if you're going to have to live with the system, fund it so that the people who are supposed to benefit, police and civilians alike, you can have timely investigations, quality investigations, but it is a source of great frustration in this city right now, that ranging from Norm Siegel at the ACLU to the media to most elected officials. And if we're going to have it, let's make it work. Do it.
Now, there have been a couple of very critical reports of New York's department by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission staff most recently, and of course the New York Attorney General. What is your attitude? What is, are there, are these reports politically motivated, or are they serious reports raising serious issues?
In the case of the Attorney Generals, I've had, and I know the Attorney General quite well, I don't believe his report was politically motivated at all. I think he's very sincere in terms of his concerns about these issues. I think he had an excellent report and highlighted many deficiencies that need to be corrected, and also at the same time the department, I think, was able to justify a lot of the activities it undertakes. The Civil Rights, U.S. Civil Rights Commission report, which has only been rumored in the papers, the official report has not been released, I have a lot of problems with that particular report. I believe that one is politically motivated. I think it is targeted unfairly only at New York City when it was originally conceived to be a multi-city effort. And based on what I've read, the unreleased or the unauthorized leaks to the New York Times, I think that report is going to be dead on arrival in the sense that there's going to be certain factions that will support it,
and certain factions won't.
And they're not going to find common ground. I think with Elliot Spitzer's, there was certain common ground that could be found.
Right.
But the shame of the Civil Rights Commission report, I think it's going to be more divisive than cohesive.
Now, what is this notion? There have been discussion off and on, I remember it for years, of better sensitivity training for police. Does it work? Or are we talking about a divide when someone comes in and under this kind of pressure, not having much understanding of a particular neighborhood? Can this really work? It sounds sort of mushy, but can sensitivity training and those kinds of things work?
It can work. My dream, my vision, through most of my police career, was not only to play a leadership role in addressing the issue of can police reduce crime. We certainly showed that we could. But it was also my belief that the other major elements that unfortunately was involved in crime in America, the race aspect of it, that if you did it correctly, you could also begin to reduce the racial tension and problems associated with crime and police minority activity or relations. The unfortunate thing that happened in New York, unlike other cities, was that we only got half a loaf. We got crime down, but instead of improving race relations and relations between the police and the minority community in particular, those situations have worsened. And that has been a source of continuing and growing frustration for me, because it was not the intent. The intent was to remove the black face from the portrait of crime in America. And that is the reality, that America, black or white, understands that for so many years the face of the perpetrator was principally black. What was not as widely understood or accepted or understood was that the victim was principally black also. So that some of the benefit of reduced crime in this city, for example, the fact that there are 1,500 fewer murders a year, well, that means 1,500 fewer victims, but there are 1,200 fewer minority youth in particular committing those murders who get to go on with their lives because that moment of passion, or if they're involved in wrongdoing, didn't occur. So we've effectively prevented a lot of individuals from committing serious crime, but now because of the continuing pressure on a lot of street conditions that I believe can be lessened, we're arresting a lot of people and creating criminal records for a lot of these people, maybe unnecessarily.
One of the things that might not be fair, given your the way you left the New York Police Department, is the governance system in New York, essentially of direct mayoral control over the police department, appropriate. Other cities have commissions, have independent. Does this really matter how these systems are governed?
Once again, one of the strengths of America is that there is no hard and fast rule, that we're free to experiment. New York's system, I think, works very well, where the police commissioner reports directly to the mayor. I think during the last 2 terms of this mayor that because of his background in law enforcement, he got too involved in the day-to-day activities of the department. It's caused him problems, caused the department's problems, caused the city's problems. Other times it's benefited because of that expertise. Dealing with organized crime, certainly they've done an outstanding job in those arenas. But I'd rather that system than the one in California, Darrell Gates, Los Angeles, where he had a lifetime appointment and didn't report to the mayor. He technically reported to a police commission that really had no control over him because of his lifetime tenure. So there is no magic bullet on this one. I think that by and large the system in New York has worked well.
Thank you, Bill Bratton. The tensions between New York's police and its poor and minority residents is a tragedy. The poor are in the greatest need of police protection. They live in the highest crime areas, and they're the least able to cope with being victims of crime. But for police to have maximum effectiveness, they must have the confidence of the communities they are sworn to serve. Achieving that confidence requires not just that police be adequately trained and respectful of racial and ethnic sensibilities. It also requires that they be accountable to credible, independent review. That's not the case with the present Civilian Complaint Review Board. That's why many commissions and others have called for strengthening of the complaint procedures. The department also needs to be governed by sound police practices, not political interference. The relentless pressure from City Hall or other people for higher arrest numbers is forcing officers to compromise their best professional judgment. The pressure is also widely reported to be demoralizing the force. Uncompromised professionalism and credible accountability are what is needed for all the city's residents and for the vast majority of dedicated policemen and women who we all rely on for our well-being. This is David R. Jones for the CSS Urban Agenda.
To comment on the Urban Agenda or for more information on CSS, contact Community Service Society of New York, 105 East 22nd Street, New York, New York, 10010. Area code 212-254-8900.